I wish the best for your son, and I wish you good health.
For years, Judge Frank Caprio has been one of the most beloved figures in America, known not for harsh rulings or courtroom drama, but for kindness, compassion, and the belief that everyone deserves a second chance. His gentle smile and the way he treated people with dignity made millions admire him. He became a symbol of what justice should look like: fair, human, and full of heart. But today, devastating news has emerged, news that has left fans shocked, heartbroken, and struggling to accept what has happened to the man who dedicated his life to helping others. What began as a quiet personal battle has now become a painful public revelation, and the tragedy surrounding Judge Caprio has taken a turn for the worse. Insiders close to the Caprio family finally spoke up, revealing new details about his declining health, the emotional toll it has taken on him, and the heartbreaking decisions his loved ones have been forced to make in the last few months. While the public saw a dignified man continuing to show grace and strength on camera, behind the scenes, the struggle was much deeper and far more serious than anyone imagined. What's even more painful is that this crisis hasn't just affected Judge Caprio physically. It has shaken the very foundation of his identity. The courtroom he loved, the people he inspired, and the work that gave his life purpose now hang in uncertainty. Those closest to him say the situation has reached a point that even he wasn't prepared for. And now, as the full truth begins to unfold, millions are asking the same heartbreaking question. Long before his story became steeped in tragedy, Judge Frank Caprio was known as the gentle force of justice, a man who turned a small municipal courtroom in Providence into a global example of mercy and compassion. People around the world admired the way he listened, understood, and forgave. His name became synonymous with kindness, but behind the warm smile and heartfelt rulings was a private struggle that few knew existed, one that would eventually push him into one of the darkest chapters of his life. It began subtly. Friends noticed moments where the judge seemed unusually tired. Family members saw signs of stress, hidden behind polite smiles and the unwavering professionalism he always maintained. Caprio, known for his emotional connection to people, began withdrawing during quiet moments. He would return home after long days on the bench, collapsing into his chair with a heaviness he tried to hide from those he loved. At first, everyone assumed it was normal fatigue. After all, he had carried decades of cases on his shoulders, listened to countless stories of hardship, and given more empathy than most people offer in a lifetime. But slowly, unmistakably, his health began to deteriorate. He struggled with energy, lost weight, and fought through severe discomfort that he refused to publicly acknowledge. What made it even harder was Caprio's nature. He didn't want anyone to worry. He continued showing up to court, continued speaking with the same softness, continued reminding people that mistakes don't define them. Even as the symptoms worsened, he brushed off concerns from his colleagues and insisted he was fine. But behind closed doors, the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. His family, those closest to him, became increasingly alarmed. Private conversations grew more emotional, doctor visits more frequent, and the uncertainty more overwhelming. For years, Caprio's life had been about giving hope to others. Now he was the one who desperately needed strength. The turning point came when the judge received a diagnosis he had been fearing. It was more serious than anyone expected, and it changed everything instantly. Suddenly, the man who had offered comfort to thousands found himself facing a battle that no amount of kindness could soften. The prognosis was difficult, the treatment options exhausting, and the emotional toll far heavier than the public could have imagined. The hardest part for Caprio was not the pain, it was the thought of stepping away from the courtroom. Serving his community wasn't just a job. It was his identity, his purpose, and his connection to the world. The courtroom was where he felt alive, where he believed he could still make a difference. The idea of letting go felt like losing a part of himself. But the people around him saw what he refused to admit. He couldn't keep going at the same pace. His speeches grew shorter, his walks slower, and his signature warmth, though still present, came through a veil of fatigue. As much as he tried to maintain normalcy, the future was changing faster than he could accept or still. In true Caprio fashion, he fought to remain optimistic. He reassured his grandchildren, comforted his children, and insisted to friends that he would face this challenge with dignity. Yet privately, the weight of uncertainty pressed on him every day. The man who had brought hope to so many now struggled to find it for himself. And as the weeks passed, his condition grew more complicated. Treatments brought new challenges, new risks, and new moments of fear. The family found themselves faced with heartbreaking decisions, balancing hope with reality. What they didn't know then was that the worst of the tragedy was still ahead. As Judge Frank Caprio's health continued to decline, the burden of secrecy became harder to bear. For months, his family and closest colleagues had protected his privacy, hoping he would recover enough to return to the routine he loved. But the truth could not stay hidden forever. His absence from court became more noticeable, and speculation began to spread. People wondered why America's most compassionate judge had suddenly stepped away from the bench. Without explanation, the pressure-mounted news outlets began asking questions. Fans sent thousands of messages, and supporters across the world waited anxiously for an update. Even as Caprio tried to remain strong, it was clear that silence was no longer an option. The family gathered quietly one evening, sitting around the kitchen table that had witnessed decades of laughter, stories, and memories. But that night, the air was heavy. They all knew what needed to be discussed. The public announcement. It was a painful decision. Caprio valued his privacy deeply, and he never wanted his personal struggles to overshadow the kindness he had tried to spread throughout his career. Yet his children explained gently that people cared about him not just as a judge, but as a human being. His supporters had followed his journey for years, finding comfort and inspiration in his compassion. They deserved honesty, and the family needed help carrying this emotional weight. After hours of emotional conversation, Caprio finally agreed. And so, a few days later, with help from his family, he sat before a camera to address the world. His voice, once strong and steady, now carried a softness that revealed the truth of his struggle. His hands trembled slightly, and though he forced a smile, there was a sadness in his eyes that spoke louder than words. When the announcement was posted online, it spread instantly. People watched in shock as Caprio revealed his diagnosis, the treatment challenges, and the reality that he could no longer serve on the bench as he once had. He expressed gratitude for the support he had received over the years, acknowledging how much it meant to know that his work had impacted people far beyond Providence. But what broke hearts around the world was the vulnerability in his message. He admitted how difficult it had been to step away from the courtroom, the place where he felt most alive. He spoke about his fear, his uncertainty, and the emotional battle he was facing. And yet, he thanked everyone with the same warmth that had made him beloved for decades. The response was overwhelming. Millions of people flooded social media with prayers, support, and memories of how Caprio had touched their lives. Fans shared clips of their favorite moments, from emotional courtroom stories to the judge's heartfelt laughter. The outpouring of love was unlike anything his family had expected. But with the wave of compassion came another painful reality. His condition was more serious than many realized. Messages poured in from medical professionals offering help, from former defendants expressing gratitude, and from families who had been moved by his kindness. Yet the announcement also sparked concern among those close to the situation, who feared that the judge was trying to be braver than his health allowed. Behind the scenes, the strain on his family intensified. They struggled to balance public support with private grief. Every day brought new medical tests, new decisions, and new fears about the future. And as Caprio's video continued circulating, reporters began seeking more details, adding pressure the family was not prepared to handle. The announcement had been necessary, but it also marked a turning point. Nothing would ever be the same. The world now knew the truth, and with that truth came a new chapter in Caprio's life, one filled not with courtroom stories, but with moments of vulnerability, reflection, and the painful acceptance that even the kindest hearts cannot escape hardship. Little did anyone know, however, that the most devastating chapter had yet to unfold. Following Judge Frank Caprio's public announcement, the world rallied around him with an outpouring of compassion, unlike anything his family had ever seen. Cards, letters, and messages arrived from every corner of the globe, each one expressing gratitude. admiration, and heartfelt prayers. For a moment, it felt as if this wave of love might be enough to carry him through the worst of his battle. But behind closed doors, a harsher reality was unfolding, one that no amount of support could soften. Caprio began treatment with the same courage he had shown throughout his life. At first, he assured everyone that he felt strong, even joking with nurses and doctors the way he once joked with defendants in his courtroom. But the treatments were grueling. They took a toll that he had never anticipated. Waves of fatigue washed over him, leaving him unable to rise from bed some days. His appetite faded, sleep became restless, and each new test brought more uncertainty. The once bright smile that charmed millions became harder to maintain. The man who had spent decades lifting the spirits of others now fought to keep his own spirit from collapsing. His family watched helplessly as the illness began to strip away the strength he had once been known for. His son described moments where Caprio would sit quietly by the window, staring out at the neighborhood he loved so deeply, lost in thought. He rarely spoke during those moments, but the look in his eyes revealed everything: fear, exhaustion, and the painful recognition that hope was slipping away. Doctors soon delivered news the family had dreaded. The treatments were not producing the expected results. The illness was advancing faster than anticipated, and the options were becoming limited. Though Caprio tried to stay positive, the reality hit him harder than he let on. For the first time, he truly understood the gravity of what he was facing. The family attempted to shield him from stress, limiting visitors and creating a calm environment around him. But Caprio, ever the protector, worried more about them than himself. During quiet conversations, he expressed guilt that his suffering had become their burden. Guilt that they now had to face decisions no family should ever face. His children tried to reassure him, but the emotional toll was undeniable. Nights were filled with whispered discussions, phone calls to specialists, and silent tears behind closed doors. Meanwhile, the public continued sending love and support, unaware of the severity of the deterioration. Friends from Providence visited when they could, carefully hiding their shock at how frail the once vibrant Judge had become. Some visits were filled with laughter and old memories, but others ended in quiet hugs, lingering gazes, and the unspoken acknowledgement that time was running out. One evening, as his condition worsened, Caprio asked his family to gather round him. Though his voice was weak, his words carried the same gentle wisdom he had always been known for. He spoke of gratitude for his life, his family, his work, and the countless people he had been blessed to meet throughout his journey. He acknowledged his fears, but he also acknowledged his peace. "Whatever comes next," he whispered, "I want you to know I lived a blessed life." It was a bittersweet moment, heartbreaking yet beautiful. His family held his hands, offering him the strength he had once given to so many others. But even as they tried to stay strong for him, they knew something had shifted. His energy was fading, his strength dwindling, and the fight was pushing him further into exhaustion. In the days that followed, his condition took another sharp decline. Hospital visits increased, emergency calls became more frequent, and specialists began using terms the family had prayed never to hear. The heavy reality set in. Hope was no longer a promise, it was becoming a memory. And just when the family believed they had faced the worst of it, a new, devastating setback emerged, one that would make the tragedy of Judge Frank Caprio's battle even more heartbreaking than anyone imagined.